Welcome back to Uplift Equine Equestrians. We are on the equestrian education warpath for our hot take on nosebands. Now, I know, nosebands can be a sensitive topic. As a society and as a equestrian industry, I know we struggle with the original purpose of nosebands versus the should-be purpose of nosebands versus why do we even have them at all? Good questions. First, let's get into what Google AI says, what the internet says on nosebands, at least the purpose of nosebands. All right, the given purpose behind nosebands are encouraging bit contact. Nosebands keep a horse's mouth closed, which helps the horse make contact with the bit and improves the rider's control. This prevents the horse from putting its tongue over the bit, crossing its jaw, or opening its mouth too wide. Reducing evasive behaviors. Nosebands can help reduce behaviors that the horse uses to evade the bit, such as crossing their jaw or putting the tongue over the bit, helping stop pulling. Nosebands can help stop a horse from pulling. Maintaining communication. Nosebands help maintain communication between the rider and the horse by ensuring that rein cues are effective. Providing an attachment point. Nosebands can be used as an attachment point for standing martingales or tie-downs. Improving appearance. I love this one. This is my favorite. Nosebands can help balance out a horse's face. For example, a thin noseband can make a horse look classier, while a wide noseband can balance out a thicker profile. Nosebands can also help give a horse a balanced and traditional correct appearance at shows. Now, before we get into the rest of it, I just kind of want to give my own opinions on every one of these bullet points. So, encouraging bit contact. Technically, if the bit is inside the horse's mouth, it is making contact. It is in contact with the horse's mouth. You touch the reins, and the reins, since they are attached to the bit, are now in contact with the horse's mouth. So what does a noseband have to do with pure contact? Reducing evasive behaviors. So if you look at the shows or horse disasters today, nosebands do not technically reduce evasive behaviors because it takes away the horse's ability to get the tongue over the bit. I'll give him that, because that technically should be the current use of the bit. If the horse has a problem bringing the tongue over the bit, usually they develop that problem for reasons, but if they tend to do that, a well-fitted noseband, sure, that is a solution for that problem. But I can tell you, it does not reduce or take away the head shaking behavior or head tossing. It does not take that away. It does not take grinding teeth away. It does not take locking the jaw away. In fact, we will see here that it encourages it or causes it. Helping to stop pulling. I can tell you this. I've trained plenty of horses with flash nosebands and nosebands that the trainer has clenched as tight as possible, and the horse still has a pulling issue. So it does not stop pulling. Maintaining communication. So it is possible to maintain communication with the horse through seat, leg, and some hand. You do not need a noseband unless you are specifically going bitless, because the whole point of a bitless bridle is that it's a noseband. But you don't need it if you have a bit in the horse's mouth. You don't need it specifically for communication. And it doesn't hold the bit in the mouth. The bridle holds the bit in the mouth. So if anyone's talking to you about how a flash noseband helps hold the bit in place, It doesn't, because, you know, you put the bridle on, the horse opens up the mouth, and it does not drop out. That's the whole purpose of the bridle. It does not drop. So the flash being over on the other side of the bit, saying it keeps the bit in place, that's a no-go in my book, because, I mean, you watch riders without nosebands and the bit's not going anywhere. Although, what it will do is prevent the rider, if the rider's hands are too tight, from pulling the bit through the mouth, because the horse cannot open its mouth. Improving appearance. So anything that causes the horse discomfort for the sake of improving appearance is against welfare policies. Because if it's just for looks, like if you think about it in driving, a bearing rein is just for looks. Because if you are driving a horse, the best place for the horse's head is forward and down, so that they have the maximum pulling capacity. Why would you add something like a bearing rein to put the horse's head up, except for just looks? So you are then, in that fashion, purposely putting the horse in discomfort for the sake of looks. And that's a welfare issue. It provides an attachment point for things like martingales. For martingales that people seem to think that prevents horses from rearing up. That's false as well. I've seen plenty of horses rear up that have martingales that are properly fitted and attached, still flip over on their rider because their rider is trigger stacking them. So that is also something that is false. Although the providing attachment point is true, it's just the purpose of a tie down or a martingale is it's ineffective. It doesn't work. It just causes the horse to have more stress because now they cannot have full range of motion of their neck. History of the noseband. Nosebands have been used on horses for thousands of years. True. For a variety of purposes, including training, restraining, controlling horses. 7000 BC, the draft horses were fitted with nosebands similar to today's Hanoverian nosebands to prevent them from breathing by pressing into their nostrils when the driver pulled on the lines. That is one way of controlling a draft horse, I suppose. 6000 BC, barbed wire nosebands were used to hold back large stallions. So since they weren't training the horses, the stallions were essentially wild at that point. They would literally put barbed wire over that poor horse's face in order to control them. So you see the use of something to control the horse because of a lack of training causing pain. Because if the horse is focusing on that pain, they are more likely to listen. It's not really listening, but just follow the release of pain. So if the horse's head is closer to you, you release that pain. So that's the pressure and release thing. So back in 6000 BC, they were still technically doing pressure and release. It's just, they were doing it with barbed wire. Right, the 16th century, the carreta, a barbed noseband with reins attached, was used to hold horses together along with sharp curb bits. Now I don't need to go into the history of bits, that is another video, but sharp curb bits, the ones that kind of are placed way back in the soft palate and are literally sharp. Like back in the day, they literally had spikes on them for the inside of the horse's mouth. So yes, we have come a long way since the 16th century. Now we no longer use spikes, but we can still get a little bit farther in civilizing the way we handle horses. But something is similar that is used in Spain today. So the Spanish today use these barbed nosebands. They are called metal nosebands. I don't know the actual Spanish term for them, since it wasn't the whole purpose of this entire video. I neglected to look that up. These Spanish nosebands, they are barbed, they have spikes on the inside of the nose, they're put over the nose, and they are used in a double bridle fashion where the snaffle rein, or what would be the snaffle rein, is on the noseband like a lunge cavesson, and the curb rein is on the curb. So that's what they use today as a, quote, kinder option. I don't really know if it would be considered kinder, but I haven't really talked to a Spanish trainer about that particular issue, so I am not as educated on that particular point. But that is the 16th century. The 19th century, so the 1800s, German trainer Ernst Friedrich Seidler invented the dropped noseband. So that became very popular to use. We all know what a dropped noseband is. It is dropped in front of the bit, so it's kind of like it's in the flash noseband position in front of the bit, but the entire noseband is dropped, so it is on the cartilage and the very, very tip of the horse's nasal bone. So that when the horse tries to open their mouth, it's on an even more sensitive part of their nose that is responding to this opening. So they're less likely to do it. In the late 1960s, this is somewhat recent, the flash noseband was introduced to keep horses' mouths shut. Now, the purpose of the flash in this was to keep the horse's mouth shut, not to keep the bit in place. So when you see flash nosebands everywhere, remember, the original purpose for this invention was to keep the horse's mouth shut. Think about that for a minute. Today, nosebands are used in many equestrian pursuits to deter horses from opening their mouths and displacing their bits. They can also be used to increase control in some cases, to comply with competition rules, because there are rules saying you must have a noseband attached to your bridle, many English ones. Nosebands came in many traditional and contemporary designs, including rounded, square raised styles, fancy stitching, and various widths. Padding can also be added for the horse's comfort. So, not that I'm trying to be cynical in this entire video, but if you are strapping the horse's mouth shut and then adding padding for comfort, how comfortable do you think that's going to be for the horse if they can't move their tongue around? It's not. The padding is used so that the horse does not get skin sores when you close the horse's mouth shut, say in a crank noseband, so that there is less external damage done to the horse. It's an issue that we all need to admit because, we have to get past the denial phase as a community about the equipment that we use. Because this is traditional equipment, tradition says that we must use it all the time. Just throw tradition out, clear your mind, and think, what is best for my horse? What makes this horse most comfortable and be able to relieve and regulate its own stress? What makes the horse more comfortable? What makes the horse relieve its stress? What is it? Please just take tradition out of it. The effect of noseband tightness, because I am not against nosebands as a thing. It does prevent the horse from pushing its tongue over the bit. It is better than what racing does, and that's tongue tying. That's even worse. But on a perfectly good horse that does not have this problem, or in a perfectly good horse that has not developed this problem because of contact issues, heavy contact issues, I am against the over-tightening of nosebands. So something that will prevent the horse's jaw from moving completely. I'm very against that. This is why this attitude is coming out. But let's get into the effects of noseband tightness to the tongue and why horses suddenly bleed from the mouth for no reason. In her video, Christina Wilkins explains what the inability to open the mouth and move the tongue around does to the tongue. Now this is in the comments below, so if you want to see her video, I encourage you because it has way more information than I am presenting in this video. I was actually preparing for this video when I saw her video, and her video was put out way earlier than mine. So I'm like, you know what? She did a huge study just to find out what all of this was. She put money into this to see the horse welfare. Yes, her study was funded by people who care about horse welfare. They're not trying to sell anything. So since she put all that in there, I'm just going to quote her and put her video down in the comments. All right, so restricting the ability of the horse to move their tongue over the bit is very different from strapping the mouth shut, with no ability for the horse to move their jaw. Jaw and tongue movement are essential for thoracic sling utilization because, remember, if you watched the video on the canter, the Classical Solutions canter overview, I talk about how the jaw and tongue are connected to all of those underneath muscles. It is a connection of muscles that work together. So you need the jaw and tongue movement to make that happen. So stress relief and swallowing saliva and circulation. So you see there's a lot of dressage horses. It's getting a lot of bad press right now, but a lot of dressage horses will be just foaming at the mouth. I mean, there is an issue of trying to cover things up with fluff, but most of that is because the horse is no longer able to swallow. So either head position or noseband tightness, but more times than not, it's noseband tightness that prevents the horse from swallowing properly. And now that's different than having a little bit of foam around the lipstick area of the horse's mouth from just working the bit in their mouth or working their tongue around in their mouth, because if you watch a bitless horse do a bunch of this training and presentation, you will still see a little bit of foam around their lips. It's because they're working their tongue around in their mouth in order to free up the ability to use the rest of their body. So that's natural. What is not natural is the excessive salivation and just dropping of saliva out of their mouth completely. That is not okay. That is excessive. The tightening of nosebands has, as seen in upper level English riding, is the first step to disengaging the horse's own ability to not only naturally carry themselves, but to cutting off the circulation to essential areas of the mouth, such as the tongue. So if you tighten your horse's mouth just shut, tighten the horse's mouth shut, they can barely move. You can't even put any kind of finger, anything underneath of that noseband from the bridge of the nose. You are now cutting off the horse's ability of just utilizing their body completely. They can no longer do that. So just think, if your horse can't get into a stretching trot, not the LDR stretching trot, but a true forward down stretching trot, if they can't seem to do that, it might be your noseband or the horse's previous training, but that's a different issue. Increasing stress like this also takes the horse's ability away to manage stress and regulate within their own environment. So you notice how a lot of these upper-leveled horses that have their mouths tight shut, and I'm not just picking on dressage, I'm also picking on jumping and all of those sports that tie that horse's mouth shut, they are no longer able to regulate their environment. They're currently in pain. They are going into an autonomic panic mode response because their body is telling them there's something wrong. We need to get away from that. We need to run away. They start not being able to focus on their environment and think rationally. So if you take that rational thinking out of the horse's brain, or the ability for the horse to rationally think through its environment, no wonder they are reactive and, quote, overly sensitive and just almost dangerous, honestly, because you stack just one more thing on top of that horse's stressor, they're just going to explode. One of the reasons why many dressage horses, when they get into the arena, they freak out. They can no longer regulate themselves, which is the opposite of what actual dressage does. Actual dressage is to teach the horse to be so confident in themselves they can go into any environment, such as war. That's the whole original purpose behind dressage. Yeah. Then you add the riding element to this. So you not only have the hypersensitivity of the mouth, so you think the horse has this bit in their mouth that is pressing on their tongue, just at rest. And then you've got this noseband that is forcing the horse's mouth shut. Remember, the purpose of a flash noseband, any drop noseband and any noseband, is to keep the horse's mouth shut. So you do that. They're strapped shut. They can no longer swallow. They can no longer move the tongue around. They can no longer relieve the pressure of the bit from the tongue, and thus slowly but surely cutting off circulation to the tongue, because just as in a bed sore, if you have constant pressure on one area without relief, it will cut off circulation. So that is at rest. Then you add the riding element, which is just the reins. So any tiny bit of pressure on that rein with the horse already stressing is going to be too much pressure. So even if you have the lightest hands possible or a soft hand, it is not enough, because the pressure on the horse's tongue is already too much, because the horse's mouth is shut, strapped shut. And then you add the training element. So you see the roll cur happening, or the LDR. LDR is still too much contact. It's still using too much rein. So roll cur and LDR, even though they're different, still not great. So you add all of that. No wonder you see blue tongues. No wonder you see a horse bleeding from the mouth suddenly. It is not a suddenly thing. It is not a sudden issue. These horses are trained like this, with the tack fitting like this, so the lack of circulation creates open sores. So you think of a bed sore and a person, because if they can't move around, if you don't know this, if a person is paralyzed or they cannot move, they must be turned on a regular basis by nurses or a healthcare worker or a caregiver. If they are left in the same spot, no matter how good the mattress is, no matter how soft the mattress is, that constant pressure on their back is going to cause bed sores. The same thing happens to the horse's mouth when you have constant pressure on the mouth and on the internal structures of the mouth. It'll cause a bed sore, basically. So these open sores start bleeding. So now you all of a sudden have a horse bleeding from the mouth. No wonder. But this is not a bad luck thing. This is not the horse bit its own tongue. How can the horse bite its own tongue if it can barely open its mouth? That's the thing. Which, I'm sure it could bite its own tongue, because it can open its mouth maybe like a couple millimeters. I guess it could do that. The bigger issue is the sores on the inside of the mouth. A group of scientists at the University of Sydney with no external funding. So, you asked about the funding question? No external funding. They funded this themselves. They volunteered their time for this. And they got people to volunteer their horses for this study. So, no ulterior motives other than trying to figure out, where is the truth? That is the motive. Where's the truth in all of this? They did a study on what the different tightnesses of nosebands and how they affected the heart rate, etc. of the horses involved. The results of the study showed when a horse has no option to open its mouth, so move the jaw, swallow, etc., the heart rate and eye temperature raised significantly. And remember, this study, which is the link for it's going to be down in the descriptions, this was at rest. They didn't work these horses at all. They just wanted to see how the horses reacted normally at rest. They weren't going to say, well, now, we have this panel of horses. We've got a few that are already getting stressed enough to raise their temperature and their heart rate. Let's just work them. They're not going to do that. That was a welfare issue. This is an experiment. They just wanted to see how the horse's normal systems were going to react at rest. With just the pressure of the bit in the mouth, with no ability to relieve that pressure, the horse shows a stress response. If the horse is given the option of moving the bit around in their mouth, relieving some of the pressure to resupply the tongue with circulation and blood flow, i.e. limiting the tightness to 2 fingers. And when I interpret 2 fingers, I'm thinking bridging of the nose, 2 fingers just like that. That's how I've always shown my horse, and that's always been a thing. And actually, I'll show you a picture of the horse that I was showing at one point, Delilah, my first one. her noseband was tightened to the 2 fingers on the bridge. And she was not the favorite. I was not known at the time in the dressage judging arena. I was actually rewarded by the judge because my tack fitted properly. Because my horse could have the option of moving that bit around in her mouth and moving her tongue around, and she, even though she wasn't like the nicest horse there, and you know, at the time it was one of my first dressage shows with the test and all that. I think this was before intro level even existed. I'm dating myself. Or that I hadn't even heard of intro level at the time. It was just training level. But anywho, I wasn't the fanciest horse like there, and I'm pretty sure I wasn't the best, most self-carriagey looking horse there either. But I did win all of those ribbons because the judge liked the turnout, liked how I handled things, and liked how her tack fitted properly. So they gave me extra points, which is nice. There are judges out there that do care. But limiting the tightness to 2 fingers width from the bridge of the nose, see the taper gauge video down in the comments or the description. Or just not having one at all when you train at home. When I train at home, if I am using a bit, there is no noseband. The only time you're going to see me use a noseband for at-home training is with the bitless bridle, and that requires a noseband. But this also applies to bitless bridles. You do not want to tie a horse's mouth shut with a bitless bridle, because just because that there's not a bit pressure in the horse's mouth does not mean they don't need to swallow anymore. If you tie the horse's mouth shut without a bit, they still have a problem locking up their jaw and not being able to swallow. So the same goes for the bitless bridles. They need to be able to at least be able to chew on a goodie. That's why in my lunge cavesson fitting video, I give my horse a goodie to make sure that that noseband is fitted properly. Taking the horse's ability to open its mouth away shows serious training gaps that, if not filled, will result in subpar results and a stress-filled experience for the horse and possibly human when the horse finally explodes. It is not a if the horse is going to explode, it's a when the horse is going to explode. I'm not saying nosebands are inherently evil or the bits in the horse's mouths are inherently bad. I'll have a bit video later. We'll talk about that later. But what I am saying is that when people take things to the extreme and say, I'm just going to strap my horse's mouth shut. That horse has a gaping mouth issue and I can't fix it, so it's just going to have to strap shut. I'm going to put a flash noseband on my horse just to fix it. Or you are told that's the normal because flash nosebands keep the horse's bit in place. No, they are originally meant and invented to keep the horse's mouth shut. This shows a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding, and don't blame yourself if you didn't understand this before and if you didn't know this before. You do the best you can with the information that is given to you. So now that you know and now that you see it, just don't participate anymore. If you have a horse and your trainer has fitted it with this bridle and you say, oh, you need to have it this tight and you need to have this flash, you need this or you need that, just take another look. You are the horse owner. You have the final say in this. You have the power. If you have a trainer that is violating all of these things and causing stress to your horse, question it. And if the trainer gets offended, then just fire them. They're not a trainer worth paying if they are going to go against the proper welfare of the horse. You're going to be happier in the long run. Your horse is going to be happier in the long run. If you find a trainer that respects the horse's boundaries, that respects the horse's need to move their tongue around, and respects the horse's need to swallow, these are basic principles and basic needs. Just think of how you would feel if that was an issue. Just think of how you would feel if that was done to you. It would be called torture. We don't want to torture our horses. We want them to be happy. So a happy horse is a horse that can do the most basic of things, such as swallow, move their tongue around, prevent mouth sores from happening because they can move their tongue around. If a trainer cannot train a horse without causing the horse's mouth to gape open, or if a trainer has caused a gaping issue, then they're not a trainer worth having. Find another trainer. Find somebody online. There's so many people. If you need racehorses, then contact me. I can probably help you, at least assist you in finding somebody that is worth paying for this. So, knowing all of this, please be a more educated horse person, be a more educated student, and a more educated trainer. Do what's right by the horse so that we continue to have the social license to operate. We do not want to be, quote, canceled by the general public because of what we are doing to our horses. And you want to be able to sleep at night knowing that you did all of that, all of the things that you could do to properly take care of them and make their life as enriching as possible. And so that they actually enjoy their time with you. If they can't do these basic things, how enjoyable is that time? And they're associating you with that time. Just think about it. All right. If you like this content and you want to see more of it more often, please like and subscribe. And thank you, my patrons, Blake, Brandon, and Margie, for supporting Uplift Equine in our endeavors in making people more aware about horse welfare and trying to educate in general. Thank you. Thank you very much for doing that. If you also want to become a patron of Uplift Equine and a patron of the classical art of riding, please go to my Patreon page and click on a level of support. All right. But thank you for watching this video, period, and please share and subscribe. Thank you. Have a wonderful day and be kind.